And joining us now with more on the calls to refuse service among IDF reservists is former head of the military's Prosecution Office for Judea and Samaria, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, and attorney Maurice Hirsch. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So the defense minister calling an urgent meeting last night. How serious of a problem is this as of now? I mean, to call an emergency meeting, clearly this is being viewed as a major threat.
So I think it has to be understood that whilst there are really high-level discussions being held and calling the meeting by the Minister of Defense to discuss how to deal with this new process and this new occurrence of soldiers really choosing when they are willing to turn up for Miluim or not for their reserve duty is something which shouldn't be confused with the fact that every single day there are tens, hundreds and thousands of Israelis who are turning up for Miluim, who are doing their service loyally, without any type of reservation, as it should be. Serving in the army should not be a question of politics. Serving in the army is a question of Israel's survival and should not be a question of whether you support this law or another law. Israel cannot and should not ever agree to that being the situation.
I mean, this certainly sets a dangerous precedent. Today, protests against the legal reforms. Tomorrow, it could be against something else. I mean, how is the Army currently handling this?
So I think the Army really is not handling this whole process very well, I have to say, unfortunately. Whilst in my last position, I was head of the Prosecution for Judea and Samaria for the period of 2007 to 2010. I was the head of the prosecution for AWOL soldiers, dealing specifically with Israelis that dodged the draft or Israeli soldiers that ran away from their full-time service, and Israelis who refused to turn up for Miluim. In 2007, I, as part of the general policy of the Military Advocate General, also imposed a stringent line on anyone saying that they refuse to come to Miluim as a result of Israel pulling out of Gaza and of the disengagement, because political decisions do not affect your duty and your right really to serve in the army. Those who are now saying that they're not going to come to Miluim after they've already passed the age where they're required to, it's fine. The army will manage and can function quite well without them. This idea that there are people who are really that have no other replacement is actually quite ridiculous. And the fact that the general press is running after this and saying, well, this is an ex-deputy head of Shmone Matayim of the intelligence unit that's decided, well, he doesn't really want to come anymore. That's fine. The army isn't based on the idea that people necessarily volunteer after the requirements of the law. If those people wish to give up on their right, not only that it's not their duty anymore, on that definite right, on that ability to be part of the fighting force defending the Jewish people, they're more than welcome to do so. But it should not be at any stage confused with the fact that tens, hundreds and thousands of Israelis are turning up for Miluim, turning up for their reserve duty every single day, sometimes endangering their lives, doing what is necessary. And that's how the army functions.
You know, so what will happen if the reservists don't show up? I mean, I think the estimate right now is that if something like 400 pilots do not show up for reservist duty, then that would affect the operational capabilities of the Israeli Air Force, for example. I mean, as you mentioned, we still have so many in mandatory service. So, you know, break it down for us. What will happen if these reservists, in fact, do not show up?
So unfortunately, it's not a question of just discussing whether the reservists show up or not. I don't know how many of the viewers actually heard that there was recently a letter signed by 2,000 members of the ground crew in the Air Force saying, well, we support the judicial reform and we are not willing to be considered as second-class citizens and our voice not be heard or our voice be thrown really into the garbage. We demand that we be given exactly the same rights and respect as the pilots. If the pilots don't have any ground force, then they can't ever take off. So really looking only at the pilots and saying, well, without the pilots, we're going to have a problem. We should also look at the other side and say, without the ground staff, we're also going to have a problem, which is why it has to be stressed over and over again. If we look at the last, at least the last 20 years, which is the period that I've looked into and researched of the election results, you'll find that there's a massive majority in the army that actually votes for the more right-wing parties. And if we allow politics into the army, if we allow certain people to say, I'm only going to serve on condition, then we're really opening the door to the fact that, well, maybe at the next time when the country decides, well, we're going to pull out of certain areas of Judea and Samaria. And the soldiers suddenly say, you know what? I refuse to carry out that order.
Absolutely.
That's not something that can be allowed.
That's a very dangerous precedent. Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Maurice Hirsch, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you for having me.